Okay friends, so we're gonna get started now on our awesome texture teddies. If you remember from last week, we had started just drawing the outline for our bears, making sure our heads were nice and big, that we had all the details on our bears, whether you did the panda or the brown black bear. And then I showed you how to draw the shoulders. If you have not done any of those steps yet, I want you to make sure that you finish these steps first before you go on to doing the texture, pattern, and color. So then the next part is to find either a black colored pencil, a black felt tip marker, or you could use a skinny Crayola or even a Sharpie. Those are your best bets for doing the texture. If you don't have any of these, you can always use a black crayon because a black crayon also works really, really well for this. Last week I showed you how to do two different kinds of texture. Texture that's closer together for the brown or the black bear, or texture that's a little farther apart. So I'm going to show you one more time in case you haven't had a chance to do that. I'm going to very quickly add some little marks on my lovely little panda bear. Now a panda bear's fur is mostly white. It has black in a few places. So we don't want to color too much texture in on the panda because we want the color to still look mostly white. So we're going to add just a little bit of texture with our marker or our colored pencil. And to do this texture, it's really easy. You're just making short little lines. And then don't forget to add some texture around the edge. I even put a little bit of extra texture around his fluffy little mouth. And then, of course, the ears. Now the ears on the panda are black, so I can add a whole bunch of texture on the ears because the ears are darker. Now with your black or your brown bear, you're going to be adding the lines kind of like the panda's ears, closer together. So I showed you on this bear just to do your lines much, 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 much closer together. I'm going to go back in and fill some more in because I feel like I did not do enough last week. Last week I was just trying to get you started, and I think I need to add more. So I'm going to add lots of little short lines for my texture. This is really simple to do. It's a really simple way to add texture and make something look more real, make it look furry. And if I were doing an animal that had longer fur, I would add longer lines, like a bunny rabbit. If I were doing bunny rabbit texture, I might use really longer lines to make the bunny rabbit fur. But brown and black bears don't have super long hair except for on their bellies. And since we're not drawing their bellies, we're just gonna do their faces. Wow, look at all that texture. That looks pretty cool. All right. I'm gonna add a few more little pieces of texture up around the ears, and then we're gonna get started on doing the sweater. And with the sweater, we're gonna use pattern and texture together, because just like we learned today, pattern and texture can be used together to make something look more interesting. And basically, you have to just decide for each row of your sweater, do you want to do a pattern or do you want to do a texture that's in the shape of a pattern? So here's how I get started. I can use a black colored pencil or a regular pencil to draw some curved lines around my sweater. Just like if you were wearing a winter sweater, a lot of sweaters have lines that go across it with the different patterns. And I'm not gonna make my lines straight across because the bear's body has a curve to it. So I'm gonna curve my lines, leaving them about 2 finger space apart from each other, just like that. Now, after I have those lines there, this is where I can decide where I want to do pattern and where I want to do texture. I'm going to decide to alternate. I'm going to do a texture, then a pattern, then a texture, then a pattern, then a texture, and a pattern. So up here at the top, where I'm deciding to do a texture, I have to look at my texture sheet. This gives me lots of ideas of different kinds of texture I could use. And I'm going to do something different than what I did on the bear's fur. So I think for this texture, I'm going to do little scribble circles like it says right here in this one. So I'm going to go around and draw these little scribble circles and see if I can turn it into a pattern just by repeating the same texture all the way across. That is how you make a texture into a pattern. Ooh, I like the little scribble circles. Those are pretty cool. Now you might decide to do these in color. I showed you how to do that in black and white. If I wanted to use a colored pencil to give it a little bit of pizzazz, I could. That color is not showing up really well. Let's try a different one. This one's a little bit better. If I wanted to try to do that texture with a crayon, I could. I could even try to do that texture with a marker. I kind of gave this top of the sweater a nice little fuzzy look. Something soft and cozy the bear is wearing. Now underneath that, I'm deciding to do a pattern. So I'm going to flip it over and look at the different suggestions for patterns. And then I can pick one that I like, or I can make up one on my own. You do not have to copy. I like this one that kind of looks like a sun. So on this one, I'm actually going to choose to use markers. I want to use red and gray. Let's start with red and gray. I'm going to use red for my circles. Patterns are not hard to do. It's just repeating shapes and lines and colors over and over again, repeating them. And oftentimes in winter sweaters, people wear a lot of red. So I picked red. I like it. It's a nice bold color. Now I'm going to use gray to add those lines. And the trick is, can I add the lines in the same place on each dot? Now I could stop there, or I could go back and say, you know what, I'm going to add the other ones too. Now your patterns and textures do not need to look like mine. You can use the sheet here to give you different ideas, or you can invent some of your own. Now I'm going to show you how to do a texture using a marker. Flip it over, look at all of my textures and make a decision. I think I want to do a zigzaggy texture. This one is doing little zigzag lines really close together. And what turns it into a pattern is that you repeat it over and over again. And fill up that whole space. Okay, once you have all of your textures and your patterns complete and your whole bear is totally filled in with texture and you think it looks pretty good, you can take a few minutes and check and see if there are any little details that you want to add. Like I'm going to decide to color my bear's eyes this turquoisey blue. I like that. And I think I'm going to color the inside of his ears gray. Maybe I'll give it a little bit of a texture. And since my bear is going to be a brown bear, I am gonna use a brown crayon to just lightly color in my textured teddy with the brown crayon. Now you can choose to do this if you want. If you want to leave your bear black and white, you can. But since this is a brown bear, I'm gonna color it in with a brown crayon. Now notice I'm not using a brown marker. Why? Well, because I already have a lot of texture on there and I don't want to cover up all the texture that I already made. And when you use a crayon over top of a marker, you can still see all of the marker lines. You're not going to cover them up. And it lets me color just the way that I like it. Give him a little brown on his nose so he looks pretty cute. Aww. Now since this is a winter bear, I could put snowflakes in the background falling. I could do stars in a sky. I could color my background any way that I want to. That is your choice, however you want to finish your bears off. Remember, you don't have to do both of them, you're just picking one. I hope you have a lot of fun doing your texture and pattern bears today, boys and girls. I can't wait to see them. See you later. Bye-bye.